Yeah! My Knicks! We don't never quit on the Knicks. And with that, we are back. Episode 3, Walking with Your Shadow. That's a intro, Knicks, because y'all know y'all done been in my shadow since, I don't know, 94?
Bro, they ain't been good in like
Shut it up. Don't talk about it. Don't say that. How dare you? Where are you from? I don't know this, man. I don't even know how we got here. What are you doing? Don't do that. We don't badmouth the Knicks, bro. Hey. Everything they do, badmouth them. Everything they do, themselves. We don't need to on them. They on themselves.
Speakers of truth.
We don't observe that shit, man. We choose delusion. We choose delusion for the Knicks. We choose to ignore. Now, why is that relevant? Because today's episode is Walking with Your Shadow.
Can't get away from it.
You can't get away from it. The shadow is in and of itself is you. So before I break down my understanding of the shadow, what do you view the shadow as to your understanding of it?
To my understanding of it now, the shadow is just another sector or version of myself. It is, quote unquote, the forbidden side. The shadow is that part of us that we were taught at a young age. There were certain traits and aspects of ourselves, our authenticity, that we had to keep in the dark because it either didn't coincide with what we were being shown in our household from our parents, what wasn't acceptable as far as being with our friends, what wasn't revered as cool, or it was the aspects of our true nature we had to repress to assimilate into society. So, for example, there are certain things that everybody keeps to themselves in their thoughts, whether they feel we don't share the same experience with others or we're too ashamed and we're not comfortable with being in that aspect, that light. That is, for lack of better words, a shadow. You?
I agree with that. When I first discovered the idea and the concept of the shadow, it was 2013 when I was reading up on Carl Jung. He's a Swiss psychologist, and Carl Jung came up with the idea on a psychological level of the shadow being the parts of the unconscious mind that are impacting and affecting us on a conscious day-to-day basis
autonomously
because we are ignoring its presence and existence, repression, and it is the things that society deems as unacceptable that we might be privy to on a personal level. If we have addiction, if we have predilections, if we have kinks, sexual kinks that aren't part of what we think the sexual nomenclature is, without even having a true sexual nomenclature. Blow your mind with that one. But yeah, the shadow is on an individual level. Each person's shadow is the manifestation of all that they internally deem as wrong and or unworthy about themselves. So it ends up being a part of themselves that at some point if they don't do the work to review what's making that part of them seem wrong to them, making that part of them seem like something they need to shame, even though it's them shaming themselves. Not based on a personal sense of shame, but the projection of others based on, again, a non-existent nomenclature. Because the societal construct in and of itself from region to region, area to area, demographic to demographic, religion to religion, it changes what their version of their society looks like. So just because we're born, depending on where we're born and what time period we're born in, we have to automatically subscribe to whatever that small little geographic location's version of society is in and of itself. Their language, their code, everything, their beliefs, whether it's in and of your nature or not. So Carl Jung recognized this, and then he started approaching the shadow, separating it from the ego and the persona and the true self. The highest self, the true self. The highest version of self only existing when you integrate all three.
Only through.
So the observation of the shadow, the recognition of the ego and the persona being just that, a persona that has been created as a generation of the proximity of where you're at, the societal construct that you yourself now have made. And then you find the higher self when you accept and acknowledge and stop running from the shadow.
Now, when I first started looking at Jung's work and I saw his studies, I was asking myself, is there a way for the shadow, the term, to not exist and truly be authentic from the start? Like, so for lack of better words, is it inevitable that a shadow will be casted and created in today's world? Or is there a way to just be autonomously authentic?
No, you can't.
No way.
There's no way. No. Because everyone that is, we've witnessed in real time. They became conquerors. Attila the Hun.
Exploit it. Yeah.
Attila the Hun, Alexander the Great.
But that's imbalance.
It's not. How can it be? Wouldn't that be true acceptance? There's I'm not limiting myself
of the animalistic nature.
But if in that time period, that wasn't the animalistic nature, that was the nature of man. As a whole, you're talking about a time period where the world was being discovered.
There wasn't
the lines were yet to have been drawn on the map.
But there were things also that were held in regard as not deemed for whatever society they had. Because there were certain things, there were still crimes. There were still things that were looked upon as.
Of course, but the only reason you had crimes is because someone had already used force to take power. Once they've claimed power, they set the laws in place for them to be able to maintain power.
Sustain it.
And only when there's enough of a resistance because the force you're exuding has become too much for society to sustain, then the process restarts itself. The old powers get knocked out, then the new powers come in, and you see a brand new structure of law, a brand new system of society, out with the old and with the new. It's literally happened over and over and over again. We just need to look at the period on the continuum of what point did it happen. So this brings us to the next personal examples of the shadow. We're just talking about these conquerors. Mm-hmm. These conquerors are great examples of people that I believe during that time period did their shadow work. And that's why they were able to exist at the level that they did. I believe in that time period, true integration of the shadow would have looked like that.
Okay, so we have criminals. We have, quote unquote, criminals. We have people who lean towards the monstrous side of humanity. Those are unaccepted. Those who lean into crime because they have repressed anything that feels like love, anything that feels like sensitivity. They're leaning more on that side of the spectrum because they've chosen not to embrace or feel that they don't have the capacity to exude those type of qualities. Is that fair to say?
If you couldn't tell, my child's on set. Quiet on the set. Yeah. Teamwork, baby. Repeat the last part for me. My apologies.
So we have criminals who obviously lean more towards the side of destruction, the will to take others' lives, all different types of crimes. But wouldn't it be fair to say that they did not balance out or integrate the sensitivity? They haven't exercised the love. That part of them is now the shadow, and they've leaned or been polarized more into the forbidden side as opposed to the quote unquote righteous side, is how they refer to the light. Is that fair to say?
No, because love is supposed to be a mutable force because it falls under the spectrum of light. Remember, love in and of itself isn't a real thing. No human being can give us what love is because it presents differently for each person because it's literally just that individual being on the spectrum of light. And they're connecting that light to another individual and it presents in the form of
Projection.
love. Yeah. Proximity causes it, the chemicals in our brain so that we can, protect our children. It's programmed there. It's part of the source code. So I feel like, no, it's either someone's glitched out and their source code, their programming is different. Psychopath, created through birth, sociopath, created through circumstance and situation, socialization, defensive mechanism, trauma, response. So I think if we're looking at people like myself, when I was living purely as a criminal, everything I was doing was reflective of what is the quote unquote criminal's lifestyle, how I'm gonna get money, if there's a threat to my money, how I'm gonna handle it. If there's an issue with my personal being, there's no talking, like there's a certain, like it's all criminal activity, like being jumping type of dump, because that's what I was taught. Just handle it, get it done. So, not by the women, mind you, not by the women. The women ain't teaching me like that. That was all the men, because they was slow. Defiably slow. But yeah, my version of the shadow was not the criminal. That was my ego and persona. The shadow during that period was the version of me that I couldn't tell my family about, but told my family about on a family trip when I saw my cousin cry for the first time in my life. Where I told him, you don't even know me. You talking about all this gangbanging shit, all shit I'm doing. You don't even know I've been sniffing for years. I've been struggling my mind. I'm trying to get my mind together. I almost blew my brains out. You don't know me. So as you talking to this character that you accepted, you don't even know who the I am. Reality kicked in. Yeah, I mean, so when the reality kicked in, for me to observe myself and recognize the difference between when I read about Jung, 2013 is when I restudied Jung. Correction, first time I read Jung's work was in prison in 2012, but I didn't grasp it properly. So when I went and took the psychology class in 2013 and reapproached Jung, I was able to grasp it. So through observation, through hindsight being 2020, I saw the character, my ego, and then the amalgamation of all of that became who I am in real time. Because I don't have to respond with dummy because other slow that taught me only had those faculties to respond with. They didn't have the faculty to have the advanced conversation, to self-observe in real time, to not let their ego and persona rule them so that they could be of the greater good for themselves and their supposed tribe. So I had to observe and accept there was a truth to what Jung said. There's a difference between the shadow, the ego / persona, and then the higher self that can only exist if and when you observe all, honestly, unabashedly, unabatedly.
Because the ego and the persona is only created through the repression of the
shadow. Because you can't be yourself from day one. So no one ever gets to be themselves because there's always someone imposing a rule, some form of how you need to be from the inception of this reality.
I'm putting the attachment over the authentic.
Oh, we're dead?
So that goes back to how addictions are built. Because I'm now choosing to repress the authentic nature of myself as a child because I have an attachment to my parents' love. So any type of emotion I'm feeling at the moment, just based on the event that is going on, I'm told not to cry because good boys don't cry. They abide by this rule. And then I grow up thinking that, well, if I keep my tears inside, I can still keep that love from my parents. So now I'm internalizing and I'm repressing my authentic nature to now grow up and I find addictions in drugs, sex, money, alcohol. Not because of the actual abstract substance, but because that substance is giving me a feeling that I was longing for and I repressed. So, like you were saying, you conform to fit in environments that you were too vast for. And in that, you internalized, you built your shadow. And at the moments where you felt you could no longer carry that repression, that's when it spews out. Because anything that we deny does not disappear. It just keeps growing and growing and growing.
Until it consumes you. And then before you realize it, because the shadow is a part of the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind rules and controls our conscious mind. Hence why I'm so heavy on affirmations, visualizations, totems, tools that when I see them and I touch them and I charge them with thoughts, ideas, verbiages, it replays in the mind versus the unguided mind is always speaking, just as the guided mind is always speaking. Question is, what is it saying? We forget we have that control because it is a muscle that we need to exercise. And this is what takes us into why integrating the shadow is necessary to even align yourself with what could be seen or deemed as your higher version of self. The integration of the shadow being the honest observation of what your shadow is, and then not having that paralyzing fear that if someone knows about, like it's like that thought kills you, it controls you.
Because the shadow is not a monster to be feared. It is a beast to be revered. There's two different monster and a beast, two different things. When it comes to monsters, it's there for you to fear. It's there for you to be scared. It's invoking something in you that is uneasy. You have that gut feeling. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to face this. Beasts are revered. They are seen in the light of it is necessary to be a beast. Why? Because it comes with control. It comes with raw, protective strength, power, but it's being directed. It's being channeled. Any beast that we've seen in the world, animal, man, they are revered because they know to the depths of where that beast can take it. Monsters, the only time we talk about monsters is about fear. The only time they're brought up is to instill fear. And we have to stop looking at the shadow as fear. We have to stop looking at it as a monster. Look at the shadow as if I integrate this, I become the beast. Take it how you want it. See where it gets you. But I guarantee you through that integration.
So now here would be an example for that I could give y'all for shadow integration, because I know it might be a confusing concept for some. So personal example for me is when I was younger, I yearned to dull myself mentally so that I could fit in with the people around me. So I ended up building addictions or addiction-like habits because realistically, when I was done with whatever the substance was, I was done. I mean, I just was done. Never had to go to inpatient, thankfully. Never had those types of issues. But it doesn't mean that I didn't destroy, in a sense, chapters and chunks of time based on the version of self that could have existed if I would have been willing to not subsist, believing that it's all I deserved. More so believing that I didn't have the ability to earn and or deserve more. It was tied into the shadow in and of itself because the substances were dulling my faculties. And then I was unable to have the inner dialogue the way I needed to. The negative feedback loop took hold, took root versus the positive feedback loop. So an example of the replacement, the integration of shadow, was I didn't deny that I have a very strong personality in whatever I choose to do. Some people call it addictive, but I don't believe it's addictive if, again, whenever I'm done, I switch gears or whatever. It's called pivoting. I pivot at any moment. I play sports. So I'm on my toes. I'm going to pivot. I don't got to do whatever. I do what the I want, when I want, how I want. That's how the game goes. If you are Neo in your matrix. And if you choose to be Neo in your matrix and you're on your hero's journey and you've observed so much pain, so much doubt, so much fear, you've internalized it, you've hated yourself to the point that you was ready to take yourself off the board. When you integrate the shadows, when you can have those conversations, say that proudly and boldly, because it's a fact that that moment in time existed. And I observed that that lesser version of self was needed for this version to stand strong now. Integration of the shadow. That's the example. Tools of observation that I could offer some of y'all. Directly call Young, Google them, do your homework, do your work. I ain't here to do the work for you. I did my work and I'm just sharing what I've done. There's so much more work to be done. Hence why he shared more information with me than anybody else on the planet right now. Anybody for the past 3 years at least straight. Like he caught the vibe because I've been sending him. He's like, oh, this is the game. I think 5 years ago, he stepped it up. 5 years ago, he really stepped it up. 5 years ago. I can tell you that for a fact. 5 years ago. So with that being said, choose wisely who you're going to take information from, especially when it comes to how to self-observe. Because if you start to self-observe the wrong way, you're not going to be standing on flat ground. And you're already not standing on flat ground because our minds are turbulent. Our minds are fractured innately. How and why? Because we're not living in our truth of who the fuck we are, how the fuck we are, how the fuck we feel. Because I'm ashamed to say it. I feel bad if I say it. I can't tell him how I really feel because well, how's he gonna feel? Nobody give a fuck how you feel. Nobody give a fuck how I feel. That's why nobody asks you how do you feel. Keep game tomorrow. Whenever you watch this video, every interaction you have with a human, tomorrow, peep how many humans ask you how you feel. You might find one if you're lucky. You're in the right circle if everyone's doing it. That means you created a vibe and a tribe. Stay strong, stay true, stay your course. But for the rest of us that didn't have that, and you have to realize I'm in such a negative feedback loop that every human around me is just an extension of the loop in and of itself. Tools of observation, Carl Jung. Start and stop there. Reason being, that's where I started. And if I take you down too much of a rabbit hole and you already don't have a foundation and you're shaky, then I didn't do my due diligence. There's so much more when it comes to the shadow. So many more people that observed, they gave their take on it. But just like everybody got their take on the Bible, if you're a believer, you have your parish, you picked your pastor. Pick your pastor wisely. I chose Carl Jung, School of Thought.
One of them.
It's one of them. And if you want any other hints and clues for the day, Blues Clues, Blues Clues. Hermes. That's all y'all get.
Give him. You give him. Give him.
But do you have any other tools you wanna add in? As far as like physical tools, what we could do with our physical being, or what we could do to realign ourselves so that we have the strength and the courage even to begin to observe the shadow? Because there's a lot that you and I both did in the physical that helped us to observe.
You know, when it comes to the tools, I think, if not the most important, is observation and self-agency. Because there's no way I can optimize my experience here if I'm not observing myself. There's nothing I can observe outside of me that is going to change, nor will it change me. So my tool that I used, I had to be hyper aware of myself. I had to observe myself in moments where I thought I had forgotten. I had to go back in my memory banks and look at where my actual personality traits stemmed from. So because at the end of the day, my personality is based off, again, who I'm projecting myself to be to the world. So it had to start from, why am I projecting this self to the world? What is this personality deriving from? Is it coming from a place of not feeling worthy, not feeling valuable? Is it coming from a place of lack? Is it coming from a place of hope? And I had to look at, what was I hoping for? Was there something I thought I should have gotten that I didn't necessarily get? Then I had to look at, why did I feel I deserved that? Why did I feel like I needed those things? Because grand scheme, I didn't have those things and I'm who I am now. So I guess I didn't need them. But now I had to realize why. There were certain instances where I would look at just my parents, just from the experience I had with my father. What about me was allowing him to not give me the time and energy I thought I deserved? But Now I'm looking at my shadow and who I chose to be. I chose not to speak in certain environments simply because I knew it would tear people down. And I already knew how it felt to have been torn down. So in turn, I didn't want to have others experience that. Fast forward, observing myself, realizing that if I'm to be accountable for myself, there is no way in hell I will not hold others accountable to the same standard, whether they realize it or not. So it just comes from a place of how much do I value myself outside of how others value me. And when I started looking at my life like that, I would say, okay, I have to set the tone. For one, I have to know who I am, and others have to see the potential of what they can be. No more, no less. Again, we're down the rabbit hole, but there's
self-agency.
Yes, and I think it serves us all well. It's just
It's a good summary.
we have to look at it. We have to observe.
Listen, it's always gonna be choices. I never will pretend to be, as I said before, I say again, I'm not your savior. I wasn't meant to be anyone's savior except for the ones I brought into this world, my children. That's the charge. You know, we're all charged once we create life with that. If you banging, you might feel like you charged with another life, but y'all know y'all lying most of the time. Because most of y'all faking fun. Ratting, telling, weirdo. So why don't we, in this new era, detoxify ourselves like Rick and Morty did in that episode? We're going to end this on a real high note. But when you detoxify yourself, I want you to do it just like they did in the episode. Separate that so you can see in real time that you aren't you without integrating your shadow.
For those who are aware of the Bible, are aware of the parables, the allegories, no, we're not preaching Christianity or any other religion. It's just a story that I find it really valuable to what we're talking about. And it's the story of Adam and Eve. Now, whether we believe that they're actually true people, whether that actually happened, but if you look at what Adam and Eve did, metaphorically, they ate from the what tree?
Tree of knowledge.
Yes. And what did they eat? The
forbidden fruit.
So,
which was knowledge.
So again, we can look at, I used to look at them at that story and say, well, damn, they fucked all humanity. Like they like everything that is occurring now in this day and time is because of them, because they did what they wasn't supposed to do. But now I see it, I understand it.
They were Neo.
They literally, instead of resting in the place of divinity and trust and feeling, they chose to know. They chose to go and grasp a concept and make sense of things for whatever reason by eating the forbidden fruit. The forbidden side. Instead of resting in the righteous, the light, you went and chose the forbidden side.
The shadow.
But what I'm seeing now is eating that fruit is just the opportunity of integration.
On God.
No more, no less. You already are in the space of trust and unity. If you care to know, now you have knowledge of the shadow self. Integrate, take the opportunity, and be the best version of you. The only version of you that is worth your energy.
Yeah. Ashe.
Ashe.
Alpha Ausar.
We here.
KYD Works. Rise of the Laws. Subscribe, like, comment. Stop acting like you're not watching this, son.
We see you.
I see you. I got the analytics. And the fact that you ain't subscribed yet, it's bothersome. But I still love your soul, because you're my reflection. And I ain't subscribed to a whole lot of because I was watching for like at least 7 years. So
shadow work.
I need y'all to not treat me the way I treated them. And let's elevate, gang. Do the shadow work, rise of the lost. I'll see y'all on the next one. I appreciate you.
Peace.
Peace.